Egypt, 13th century BC. The most powerful empire of the ancient world stands on the forced labor of a people enslaved for more than 400 years. A man raised in the luxury of the Egyptian palace is about to return to challenge that empire. What comes next, Egypt will never forget. Moses was not born a slave. He was raised as an Egyptian prince, but upon discovering his Hebrew origin, he fled into the desert. There, before a bush that burned without being consumed, he heard a calling that would change the destiny of an entire people: return to Egypt and confront the empire that had raised him. Moses returns with his brother Aaron and demands, in the name of their God, the freedom of the Hebrew people. Pharaoh listens with contempt. He has hundreds of his own gods carved in gold, and no fugitive slave is going to give him orders. He laughs in front of his entire court. That same night, the overseers wake the slaves with impossible demands. Now they must gather their own straw, without reducing the daily quota. The exhausted Hebrew people blame Moses for making everything worse. But something has already been set in motion, and no one in the palace can stop it. At dawn, Moses strikes the waters of the Nile before Pharaoh's entire court. Within seconds, the river turns a deep red. Fish die by the thousands. The stench spreads for miles, and no one in the palace can explain what they just witnessed. For 7 days, all of Egypt searches for drinking water without finding any. The Egyptians dig desperate wells. The water that comes out is also red. The priests try to imitate the wonder without success. Pharaoh watches it all from his balcony, determined not to yield. Days later, millions of frogs emerge from the river. They invade every kitchen, every bed, every Egyptian home. The people cannot take a step without crushing one. Desperate, Pharaoh promises to free the Hebrew people if the frogs disappear. Moses prays, and the next day, mountains of dead frogs cover the streets of Egypt. But as soon as the danger passes, Pharaoh breaks his word once again. His pride, once more, weighs more than his people's suffering. The very dust of the earth becomes the next plague. Lice cover people and animals alike. Not even the court priests dare to try replicating it this time. For the first time, they quietly admit this is not magic they recognize. A dense swarm of flies falls upon Egypt, ruining markets and food. But something troubles Pharaoh more: the Hebrew region remains completely clean. For the first time, it becomes clear the punishment chooses. Inside the palace, advisors begin to whisper. A disease with no known name kills Egyptian livestock. Cows, horses, and sheep fall dead in the fields within days. Farmers, kneeling before their lifeless animals, cannot understand how to stop it. The Hebrew herds, once again, remain healthy. Painful boils appear on the skin of every Egyptian, with no distinction of class. Not even Pharaoh is spared. The court's best physicians find no remedy. The empire that believed itself invincible begins to fracture from within. The sky suddenly darkens in the middle of the afternoon. Hail the size of stones falls, mixed with fire no one can explain. The wheat fields, which feed much of the ancient Mediterranean, are wiped out within minutes. For the first time, Pharaoh's advisors openly beg him to free the Hebrews before nothing is left of the empire. Pharaoh listens in silence, his face no longer showing the same confidence as before. A cloud of locusts covers the sun like an eclipse. They devour every green leaf, every shoot, everything the hail had left alive. Hunger, once distant, becomes a real threat for all of Egypt. Egypt is plunged into absolute darkness for 3 days. It is not nighttime, it is as if the sun itself had gone out. Egyptian families shut themselves in with torches that barely light the way, trapped in an almost unbearable silence. When the light returns, Moses warns of something no empire had ever heard. At midnight, the eldest son of every Egyptian household will die, without exception. Furious, Pharaoh throws him out of the palace screaming. But something in his eyes reveals, for the first time, real fear. That night, Hebrew families mark their doors with lamb's blood and shut themselves in silently, waiting for what is coming. It is a ritual still commemorated every year, thousands of years later. At midnight, without warning, the eldest son of every Egyptian household dies, with no distinction between rich and poor. Cries of grief spread across the entire empire in a single night of absolute devastation. Inside the palace itself, Pharaoh's heir does not wake at dawn. The man who believed himself a living god falls to his knees, utterly defeated. He utters only one word that ends 400 years of slavery: leave. Before dawn, the Hebrews were already prepared. They carry belongings, animals, and sleeping children, and set out for the border. The Egyptians, stunned by grief, offer no resistance, some even hand over gold just so they would leave. More than 600,000 people march through the desert, led by Moses toward a freedom they barely understand. Behind them lies a devastated, unrecognizable Egypt. But Pharaoh, recovered from the shock, changes his mind. He gathers his army and war chariots, determined to pursue the people he just freed. The Egyptian army catches up with them right at the shore of the Red Sea. Moses stretches his staff over the water. The waves part in two, forming a dry path between suspended walls of water. The entire people cross throughout the night. Behind them, the Egyptian army, determined to follow, enters the same path between the walls of water. When the last Hebrew reaches the other shore, Moses stretches his staff once more. The walls of water suddenly collapse onto the Egyptian army, which disappears beneath the waves within seconds. Thus ends one of the most devastating episodes of antiquity. To this day, archaeologists and historians debate how much of this story is literal and how much is memory transformed by oral tradition.